There's a story I want to share that to me was was a profound insight how to relate to our society and how it functions. So let me start with an experiment or a test that everyone should be aware of, which is called the Asch Conformity Test. I'm not totally aware of all the details, but the essence of it is that there's this psychological test where you basically hire a bunch of actors, put them in a room, and then there's this one person who's not in it and thinks that all the participants are part of the test, but really there's just this one person. And then some authority in front shows a picture of two lines and asks whether they are the same length. And they are clearly not the same length. The picture is like very obviously it's not the same length. But all the actors are hired to just act as if they are the same length. And then basically the test it's not about perception, optical illusions, or any of that. It's about whether the one person that thinks the rest are not actors is able to, whether he or she will stick to his own truth and say that the lines are not the same size. And interestingly enough, I don't have the exact numbers, but the majority of people, or like a big proportion of people, actually don't stick with their own truth. They trust basically the mob more than they trust their own perception. And the way I kind of frame that is humans perceive socially. I don't know on at which step the illusion, if you want to call it like that, happens, i.e. is the person aware that they are not the same size but is afraid, or is that fear so subconscious that actually perception is influenced in that situation. But in any case, like all that aside, the end result is that people will go with whatever the crowd says. So if you look at that, like if you see that the fact that we had that understanding for a long time of how human psychology works, then this is like a huge exploit you can use to basically get people to do stuff that is against their own interest. There are like these cute examples of that, where it's like, if you ever seen like a late night talk show or something like that, the person says something, the person in front says something which is supposed to make you laugh, but they the creators of the show just have like an applause sign that tells the audience to clap or to laugh or whatever at the right moments. And that is actually like a high level psychological, it's like an Asch conformity attack on your psychology, because you perceive socially, so it's funny because everyone is laughing. That's like one of the main principles around which most of our broadcast media is structured, because that's one of the main goals, to basically make the social machine run, because it requires people to become less than people and more like cogwheels, and that is one of the main tactics of how this is achieved. There's almost a mathematical way of stating how the fact that we perceive socially can be hijacked and exploited by broadcast media and screens effectively, which is, evolution has not given us the capacity to differentiate between a real face and a face simulated on a screen, which might be a camera filming a real face, and more it could be a deep fake. But the fact is, they are just pixels simulating a perceptual experience that couldn't have happened prior to this technology existing. And so the idea is basically, back in the past, if you had like, before even broadcast was a thing, you had a room full of people that were not paid to be actors, because that's too expensive. You can't buy out the whole of humanity, or like the big chunk of humanity. So if you had a room full of people, you would have, and they would just talk to each other, you would always get like a somewhat accurate representation of what the whole actually believes, where the center of gravity in the collective actually is. In the healthy indigenous state of our of social organisms, that is more or less the case. Now, but if you now have the ability to take one person in that room, which can be an actor, because that is feasible, to buy one person out, and then put this person in front of a camera, and now let's say there are 100 person in the room, but you have 300 screens in that room. You pay one person, put it in front of the camera, and that person will now say the lines are the same size. In our everyday life, if you do an integral, like a weighted sum of over all people alive today, and then you basically, for every perceptual experience, you count how many actual faces are they seeing, and then you count how many simulated faces they see. I think the outcome, if that would be possible, would be quite shocking. It would reveal the shockingly high amount of simulation that we are embedded in, without even noticing it. Now, the point where this gets really interesting is, I discovered the other day a series on YouTube, which you can find, called The Dead Internet Theory. And full disclaimer, I haven't watched the whole thing, but I started watching the first episode, and I think I got the gist of it. The claim is basically that there's this theory that the internet actually seems like it's populated by humans, but we actually don't know that. It certainly started out like that, Web 1, if you like, with just nerds in their garage, without anyone really caring about them. But the more this thing kind of solidified into the exploitative infrastructure of Web 2, the more incentive there was, I would argue, to influence that infrastructure. And the dead internet theory basically asks the question, do we actually know how much of the internet is actually alive? How much of it is actually created by real people, and how many people, like users, are actually real? And I mean, everyone knows that bots are a thing and that they're used to influence opinion and stuff like that. But for me, there was a shift in perspective to think, do we actually have any clue how much percentage of the internet is actually alive? I just want to invite you, without having any evidence to support that claim, but just as an experiment, what if 90% of everything on the internet is bots and AI? What if the whole of humanity using the internet is like that one actor in the Asch Conformity Test? And not the one actor, the one non-actor. And the rest in that room are the perfect actors, which are bots. They just do what you tell them. So for me, that kind of made this whole effort of Elon Musk to kind of demanding to know how many bots there are on Twitter much more tangible. Like, it makes total sense, because you basically create this hall of mirrors where you let these socially perceiving creatures, we call humans, in, and then you can basically do anything you like. And I also, for me, that was a big shift in looking at cancel culture, because I think we need to be careful to come to quick conclusions about human nature. Cancel culture is certainly not a charming phenomena for us as a species. If that really comes out of our nature, which is possible, I'm not closing down that door, but if it's entirely organic, it's at least a different situation, as if it's just a weapon used by actors, bad actors, to influence, to control the social machine in a way that benefits them, that makes them feel safe. I guess I'm saying that as much to whoever is watching as I'm saying that to me, is like, I want to invite you to basically do that software update in your relationship to the internet and broadcast media and all of that stuff, because every time you think you have an opinion that no one, the mainstream, doesn't share, and because of that, you're afraid to kind of stick with it. I want you to remember the Asch Conformity Test. I want you to be aware of the Game of Thrones raging in our society, and I want you to think about what the actual numbers are, how alone you actually are, and look more around you to the actual humans in the flesh, as opposed to some text or pictures you see on screens.